Hi, everyone. Welcome to our September Artist Talk. The title of the show is The Thread Between. And the artists that are going to be speaking today are Rebecca Tully Fulmer, Leah Carroll, and a newest ground floor artist, Annie Buttress. So we're real excited to hear them talk about their work, and we'll take some questions afterwards. They're each going to speak for about 10 minutes, and then we'll do a quick question session if anybody's got anything they want to comment on or ask about. So Rebecca is going to start first. So I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca.
And Jennifer, if I'm going over, we just cut me off, pull the hook. Okay. Hold on. Something's happening. Okay. Did it. Yay. Okay. Can everybody hear me? I didn't mute or anything like that. So y'all can hear me? Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So, hey, I'm Rebecca Fulmer. A little background on me. I grew up in Birmingham, and I have a degree from the Auburn School of Architecture and Interior Design, and I've worked in interior design for several years. And I'm telling you this because it's relevant to the piece, but my parents both grew up in Mobile, and as well as my husband, and my one set of grandparents had a house on Dolphin Island and the other set on Fish River. And my dad fished the waters of Mobile Bay up in the Delta and the Mississippi Sound and the rivers, and called it his playground growing up. And so, me and my brother and sister grew up that way as well. And in 2003, we have 4 boys, and they're 4 very wild boys. And in 2003, we decided to purchase a house down here, which I'm here right now, actually, on the bay, on Mobile Bay, for the kids to be closer to their grandparents, my husband's parents, and some of my relatives down here, but also to get them away from the screen that was kind of taking over their lives, the video screens, etc. And I wanted them to just fall in love with these waters. So, okay, let's see. So these are some pictures of the sunset and our view. We face directly west. And it's something that I've just become a huge source of inspiration for me. The water, the sun, the sky, the wildlife. It's just something I'm thinking about all the time when I'm not here. And when I am here, I'm just constantly watching the bay and seeing what's happening and seeing the changes. The water is it's a very emotional body of water to me. It's emotional in that, it's very shallow until you get to the channel where all the ships pass through. But I've seen people walk, a mile out into the bay and only be in waist deep water. So it's something we're always negotiating, if the tide's in or out, if we can get our boat out. But the interesting thing about it being shallow is that it can be this glassy surface. And then in a matter of minutes, it can change into this just very excited atmosphere and crazy waves and wind blowing around. And it just, I don't know, it just seems like an emotional experience. But also the sunset is a big part of the tradition around here. We have wharves here, not piers, even though City of Fairhope has the Fairhope Pier, but everybody has individual wharves. And every night when we're down here and when the sun's setting, everybody comes out to watch the sunset. And it's fun to look and you see these families out. And it's really this long tradition that's gone on for, as long as people have had houses over here, going out and celebrating the sunset. And I think it's so interesting because it's just something, the sun setting, whether you're on a mountain or a body of water or on a plane or anywhere, it is so awe-inspiring that as long as humans have been on this earth, it's something that I think we all just stop and have to watch. And I just feel the connection through history, through humanity, and through my own personal family history. I love thinking about, my relatives have been down here since, as far as we know, the 1830s, and were merchants in Mobile. And, I love thinking about what they saw and how I'm looking at the same view that they were looking at. So, okay, why is my slide not changing? Wait. Okay, help. What's going on here? Well, no. Sorry, y'all. For some reason it wasn't responding. Anyway, here's another view of the sunset. So in my work, let's skip over. I have been really drawn to silver and reflective surfaces and illuminated surfaces and materials. And it's always played into my work, either through using mirror or paint, or collaging with diachronic film, which is what this piece is about. This is a digital print on watercolor paper with diachronic film layered on top in a collage. I also, let's see, this will, I'm sorry, y'all, but my it's not advancing. Is there? No,
There you go.
Well, it's advancing forward too. There we go. So this is another piece. These are these shadow boxes that I did for phase transition that was shown at Ground Floor Contemporary in February. And it's hard to see in these images, but the back wall of the box is a mirror, and I used a printed image on acrylic sheet to reflect on itself with the mirror. And these are also images of I took of Spanish moss that I had taken right after Hurricane Sally, when the bay was still very active and angry after the storm. So anyway, I did this piece back in 2019, and it's silver paint, and it shows, me just trying to recreate this view of water and sun. And the box that's attached to the piece is, I'm really not sure what that's about, but I think it has to do with just, there's always different little critters and stuff popping up out of the water. And I'm always looking to see, we have a lot of mullet that jump and little heads that pop up and everything. So anyway, and then the pink started coming in as really, I think, in trying to kind of recreate that color of the sun and the sunset. So on Rhythm of Water, which is the piece I did for the show, I chose to, over the past year, I've been learning this technique called traditional water gilding. I started taking gilding classes through Zoom with this man in Seattle, and Charles Douglas, who is a master gilder. And I started taking these classes in different types of gilding. And the third one I took was on traditional water gilding, which is, it's the most time consuming and difficult of all the gilding processes. And, but it can produce this just incredibly brilliant, reflective surface, and it can last forever. This technique has virtually been unchanged for hundreds of years. It really dates back to the Egyptians. But these images, these pieces were done with these images of, see, I'm not advancing again, images of sunlight. Okay. Sorry, y'all. I don't know why this is happening. There we go. So over the past year, I've also been taking these pictures of sunlight hitting the peaks of the water. And, sometimes when you look at a water and the sun's kind of glaring down on it, in that V, it just looks like diamonds bouncing on the water to me. And I kept looking at that and just wondering, like, how can I recreate this? This is so beautiful. So and these are the images that I use for the pieces. But so in learning this traditional water gilding and being kind of obsessed with reflective surfaces and this all kind of came together, and let's see. Okay, here we go. So I'm bouncing around, but anyway, in traditional water gilding, you start with layers of gesso, and it's a gesso that's particular to gilding. And it's the gesso is this whiting, and it's mostly made of calcium carbonate. But you mix that with rabbit skin glue and water. And this is me making the gesso, and you can see I've got my rabbit skin glue and the whiting. And then on the far right are the pellets of rabbit skin glue, which is kind of disgusting, but anyway, it's necessary evil. So these are the panels with the layers of gesso. So I've got about 5 layers of gesso. And then I took the images that you saw previously, and I turned them into black and white and transferred them onto these panels in graphite. And then I took, on the right, you see raised gesso, which this is a form of technique called pastilla, which you will see in, old frames and stuff, but it's an Italian term that means pastework, and it's a thickened gesso. And you can draw with it, and it creates a low relief, and then you apply that to the surface, and then you can gild on top of that. And this technique was used in a variety of ways in Italy throughout the Renaissance, but you still see it today in frames, on small pieces of furniture, coffins, and in some areas of the sacred panel paintings. So here we go again, not advancing. Really don't know what's happening here. All right, go back. Sorry, it won't advance, and then it just jumps. So these are the 6 panels, and I've got my layers of gesso, and I've drawn on top of them, which I really even love them as they are right here. But anyway, you can see how I transfer the images. So then the next step is to put this layer of what is called bole, B-O-L-E, and it's a richly pigmented, another undercoating, and it's applied with a brush, and you add rabbit skin glue and water to it as well. And so when you apply it with a brush, it's very liquid. And it comes in very variety of colors, but this on the left is a black that I was working on, and I wanted to show you a picture of it. But on the right is what is the undercoat on my panels. It's a Latimer blue. But it also, what's interesting about this is all these layers create a padding so that when you lay down the leaf, you're able to burnish it and get this truly shiny, reflective surface. So on the left are my gilding tools, and the brown panel, square rectangle, is my gilder's pad, and then the gilding knife that you use to cut the gold, and then the gilder's tip. And the interesting thing about this gilder's tip is a lot of people think it's static electricity that you use to pick up the leaf, but really you brush it along your cheek or on your hands in order to pick up the oils. And then that allows the brush to be able to pick up the leaf, so that when you go to lay it on the bowl, it'll hold on the leaf until you're ready to lay it down. But anyway, the next step, so you got the gesso and the bowl, and the next step is, once the bowl is completely dry, then you do this wash of water and alcohol. It's called Gilding Water. And what happens is you go to lay down the leaf, and it'll hover just above the panel, and then suddenly it'll just attach itself to the panel. And so you've got to be really skilled in what you're doing, which can be also quite frustrating. Another element is these leaves are so delicate that, I mean, they're as light as air. And if you breathe the wrong way, it goes flying off, and you got to start all over again. So, and a lot depends on the success of the adhesion of the leaf. Sometimes humidity can affect it, which happened to me in this with this piece. but you're always worried about your temperature of the water and the air in the room and the humidity in the room, et cetera. So it's a pretty finicky process. But the piece on the right is what was my original goal, to have this very reflective surface. But because there were some things that weren't going so well, this leaf was not quite embedding into the surface, as you can see in some areas. So I ended up pushing it further to, all right, we're going to advance in a minute. There we go. Let's see. All right. So ended up having to do, which is another technique, a rub with the whiting powder. And you just create this rub with alcohol, this paste with alcohol, and then you rub it over the piece. And all these techniques are what framers use in creating frames. So you'll see, if you go to frame shop, you'll see these different surfaces, or surfaces that look similar to what you're seeing here. These photos, they don't quite look as, they look a little more muted in these photos than they really do. But you can see how I used that glow of the sunset in this paint color, which is called opera. And it glows on the wall behind it, and it looks like it's being lit from behind, but really it's just this paint that's kind of creating this glow. So anyway, these are the 6 pieces. And then those are them all together. And that's it. So do you have any questions?
That was great. Are you ready, Annie?
Okay.
Yes. Let me.
Rebecca, unshare your screen. Great, perfect.
Okay. All right. Am I on? And are you seeing the screen? Yes, great. Okay. Hi. My name is Annie Carroll Buttress. I wanted to thank everybody at Ground Floor, Sarah Garden Armstrong, Jennifer Marshall, and Rebecca and Leah for coming together. The artists at Ground Floor are really inspiring, and I feel truly incredibly grateful to be part of this show and of the collective. I am an artist who has primarily been working with the idea of the landscape for the last 21 years, mainly realized in painting. I have 4 basic overarching themes that I have worked with. The basic ideas that and they are usually pretty interconnected. So the idea of place and belonging, the idea of the relationship of ground to atmosphere or negative and positive space, change and time, and then using historical landscape painting traditions. So the exhibit that I have currently in the thread between shows 5 star wound paintings that are part of a larger series, originally a series of 28. These star wounds are also known as impact craters. And impact craters are basically meteorites that hit a planetary surface. So it can be Earth. There are more in they're especially Galileo first discovered lunar impact crater in 1609. I need to double check that, but I think that's accurate. So these are structures, and the thing that I found so inspiring is what I learned is that the Wetumpka crater, which is right outside of in Alabama, and influenced a garden that I've been painting about, Jasmine Hill. What I learned about impact craters is that there are relatively few in the United States. They were only just really discovered. The first one was discovered in 1900, called the Barringer crater in Arizona. But what's interesting about these impact craters is that they're it's rarely understood, but it has absolutely everything to do with influencing our space. And it was this instantaneous impact. And so to me, this concept was sort of new and really kind of dovetailed nicely into some of my ideas about the landscape. We're looking for things that really can talk about change. And so the way I have chosen to paint about these impact craters is that they're shown as painted sort of as this oblique angle, which is kind of something I use frequently in where I will paint about shadows or different sort of motifs that are on this impact angle, or then that sort of relates to the way they were striking the earth. I want to show you the way this exhibit was originally shown with 28 paintings. And so the reason why 28 is that this was these paintings being about impact craters. I use US geological imagery, and I'm gonna scroll through this quickly and then get to the images that I use. So this is a good example of, this is the Odessa piece. So I'll go back to the Odessa. That's Odessa and the way I've painted it. These are some of the images that I've used, the source material. And so where my pointer is, if you can see that, that is a US geological satellite image over the site of Odessa. And then these are either aerial photographs or different other types of maps. And so what I'm really interested in these pieces that are kind of bird's eye view paintings is kind of creating new maps using existing mapping kind of language where and sort of creating my own legend. And so you can, I'm going to show you kind of a lot of images and then talk through them. So the Odessa kind of listed how large they are. This is Red Wing painting, and then I'll show you the imagery where they derive from. So you can see this ovoid, or sometimes they're more circular imagery. In that hatching mark, I've kind of pulled that linear language, and kind of turned that into my own legend. This is Chesapeake Bay, which everybody that walked in to the gallery identified Chesapeake Bay, which is really, people should be proud of their Chesapeake Bay awareness. And so this is, this shows you how large, 40 kilometers in diameter. So you can see the satellite imagery on the right and then mapping on the left, just how impactful these events are, and then how it, without really general knowledge, how it influences the way we interact with the space around us. And the other idea of that I found to be so inspiring was just having this event that kind of erupts and pulls the substrate from the earth above ground. So this is Calvin. So the original idea it really came through from the larger series that I was working on in the larger painting, which was about the Wetumpka crater in Alabama. And this piece also merges the actual shape of the crater. And then in this sort of like foreground idea of kind of what is happening at this time, where this at the garden, they kind of managed the burn. So I was kind of experimenting with how to use bird's eye view images with kind of in intimate kind of stories about a place. And this sort of a bit of a departure series for me that then kind of comes around. So the series you can see what I see is how the idea of bird's eye view and change kind of come into play. And so I'm going to now kind of flip through series where I talk about these other kind of overarching themes, and they all sort of connect up. So this is a piece that I did in 2008. And again, this the shape, that shadow shape, where it's on an oblique angle, painted at an oblique angle, is something that I've kind of followed through, very much inspired by the kind of printmakers and the use of hatching and shadow, the way shadows are traditionally connoted, and that is sort of a method that I've incorporated into most of my work when I'm using shadow. Here's a bird's eye view piece. This is one of the first bird's eye view mappings that I did using aerial photography and also another USGS satellite imagery, where I was kind of free-forming the overall Birmingham. So that's 280. This was a piece that was 49 and 56 inches, and it was they were all this project was designed to be broken apart and given away. So they're 7-inch squares each. And this is one of the first pieces I really did using resist. And so resist is a material that is a latex material that I use where I paint on and then cover with gouache or acrylic, and then I remove the resist. And this gets back to one of the other overarching themes that I've been really interested in working with, is this idea of change in the landscape. So for me, by using resist, it creates you kind of mark the moment of time. So I'll use resist to paint in the shadows and then kind of record them by painting over them. And then I remove the resist. And so for me, that void that's created is very symbolic, or following the same pattern as a fleeting shadow, or change in the landscape, where it will be a built environment, where the environment is changing, where there was something before and then it has changed. And so resist is something in these voids that it creates, is also a motif starting way in 2002 that I've continued in various ways. So this, the idea of Parade of Homes is shows the sort of positive and negative motif of the built environment, and where I'm playing with a horizon line. And this show that I exhibited at Space 111 was really about weather and a change of seasons. And this again was about one composition, but the 4 seasons. So the idea of referencing serial time, and how time kind of merges from one season to the next. And this again was kind of the largest scale where I was really working with resist. Resist being, in this case, kind of being using the same composition as a fallen fruit. I selected this piece because of the way that Matisse particularly shows the change in time in the background, where there is clearly time passing from the left to the right across the kind of chromatically, the way he uses that shift in the background. This piece has always been one of my go-to for the simplicity of showing how you can show change across a field. This is a fallen fruit, which was the composition that was the original composition that I ended up using for that large Space 111 show. This work really focused on the idea of foreground, kind of middle ground, background, and kind of this idea of what has been lost. So these pieces are really kind of focused on a foreground, and I'm playing with shadow. These are kind of these beginning pieces where I'm really playing with the idea of kind of positive and negative spaces. Again, change across, kind of using chromatic change language. And I wanted to quickly, I think my time's almost up. This is, I'm going to cover the Peachtree Trail, where this was a large series. This was kind of an example of going down to the same field, same tree in Chilton County, tracing shadows on the panels as they cross overhead. And then I bring them back to my studio and trace kind of a mirror image. This is an example. You can see here the kind of the way there's a singular image, and then the image, the reflective or the mirror image, shows kind of multiple shadows of the same tree traced across the panel. And there's the show that it was ultimately resulted in. 28 panels, so 7 7 panels of each season, same trees each season, same orchard. That's the collection from winter, January to December. And I wanted to show another piece where there was a mirror image with the horizon line, kind of idea of a horizon line at the merging of the two. And finally, this work is the kind of more recent work where I'm thinking about breaking up the idea of how you looking up, really mainly looking and punctuating atmosphere. These pieces are the more recent pieces where the atmosphere is again kind of broken apart. I'm interested in breaking, kind of uniting and breaking foreground, middle ground, background. Sometimes it's really just foreground. Okay, thank you. I think I went over.
No problem. Everyone's doing so great. Okay. And then Annie, unshare your screen too. There you go. All right, go ahead, Leah.
Hi, everyone. Can y'all hear me? Okay. My name is Leah Carroll, and I've been a member at Ground Floor for several years now, since 2017, I believe. And I'm so honored to be a part of it and just to be in this show. And I'm going to talk about my pieces today that almost didn't happen, as Jennifer knows. So really, it's just a story of how these kind of came together, because the work is just probably the most personal work I've ever done under the most emotional circumstances I've ever worked in. And just, I feel like it kind of set my work free a little bit, just to work in the way I did for this show, because I'm just going to kind of tell you the story behind the pieces. And wait, hold on. For some reason, my Photoshop isn't coming up. Hold on. I'm going to do share screen. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. Can y'all see my screen now? Okay. So the story, I just kind of have to go back in time a little bit, because kind of everything, the whole situation that we're in now with quarantine and COVID and everything that has just led to this moment in time is kind of why I made these pieces. Back in 2015, a couple of years before I joined Ground Floor Contemporary, Max, my son, and I moved into the house that I live in now. It's in Southside. This house is over 100 years old, and I rented the top floor of this home, and from a man that had lived here and grown up in this house since he was 6 years old. And there's this huge history with this family. They owned a bookstore down in 5 Points South during the 60s, during the height of the civil rights movement in Birmingham. And they, there's all of the archives from this family are in this home. And when I moved in, I didn't really realize that I was going to kind of become a part of this crazy family that had grown up, that had lived in this home, and all of the archives of the family was here. So one of the children, David, he lived downstairs, and he's very eccentric and just unlike anyone I've ever met, and definitely an artist in his own right. I rented the upstairs apartment from him. I'm going to pull up the portrait that I did of him so that you can. We're going to start with that one. So I rented this apartment, and it's really the top floor of the house, and he lived on the bottom floor. And I lived here for a couple of years, just renting it for him. But let me go back a little bit. When I first moved in, his sister took care of him. He has a lot of health problems. And I had met her, and she helped me with the lease and things like that. Well, about 3 months after I moved in, she unexpectedly passed away. And I knew at that point that David kind of needed somebody to look after him. He has polycystic kidney disease. His brother had died from it. All of the 6 kids had a lot of health problems, and there were only 3 of them left at that point. And he just needed help with executive functioning, like making sure the bills were paid. Basically, the rent that I gave him for my space in this house was his income. And he just, things didn't really get taken care of unless he had help with that, which his sister had done. So I just said, well, this is a great situation for me to be here with my son. I feel safe because he's always here, and he's a really good person. And so I just kind of, started helping out with making sure the bills were paid and making sure he had a way to get to his doctor's appointments. He had a vehicle that his sister had left him, but after she died, he had a sister that really didn't really care about him, that lived in Texas, and she was the executor of that sister's will. She kind of took the car, and he was just left alone with nobody to look after him. And he had this very serious disease. So and he had a kidney transplant, and he was immunocompromised. So I would just make sure he could borrow my car and get to his appointments, and, kind of just help him look after things in the house. Well, about 3 years ago, the sister that I mentioned that didn't really care about his well-being or what was going on, she decided that she wanted to force the sale of the home so that she could get her money out of it, because it was jointly owned between all the kids that were left. And so she decided that she was going to force the sale of the house and started a lawsuit. Well, at the same time, I had met Scott, who's now my fiance, and he's an attorney. And we were talking, and we were just kind of starting to date at that point. And I told him the situation we were in with our home. And I said, I've decided to live there because if I didn't, I love the house. It's a beautiful house, but David he really needs somebody to help him take care of this house and take care of his, all of his responsibilities, getting bills paid, things like that. And I'm really afraid if she forces the sale of this house, of course I can move somewhere else, but I don't know what's going to happen to him, because he's lived here since he was 6 years old. All of his family's archives and the history of his family, everything is here. And there's so much I could go into there, but like, for instance, his father photographed every single person that came into the bookstore, and he was a photographer. So we have all the archives from this little bookstore that was in 5 Points South during the Civil Rights era. I mean, literally the KKK burned crosses on top of the bookstore. Allen Ginsberg, we have pictures of him in the bookstore. So there are all these amazing stories with this bookstore, the family, the history there, and a lot of kind of crazy stuff too, and pieces of puzzles that I'm putting together now over the years. But I knew that all of this was here in this house, and David didn't have a way to manage this by himself. His health, was very precarious. And I just thought, the best thing for him is to stay here. And, what was going to happen if his sister forced the sale of the house? Well, Scott, then we were dating, he said, well, let me look at the case. So he got involved and just kind of helped us out, took the case with and talked to his sister's attorney, and worked it out where I could buy her out of the house. And so I bought her portion out of the house. David only had 1/6 of the house, which wasn't very much. So he said, I'll just give you my portion of the house, and you can buy my sister out, and I will, and then we'd work this out. I was like, yeah, and then you can just stay here. I mean, I won't ever make you move, and you can just stay here for the rest of your life, in your apartment downstairs. And that was great, because we were good friends and everything. Well, this was, this all happened, and when I bought the house, I was able to take out like a restoration loan, and I've restored the house, and it's just been this great story. Like, we've just been so happy. My son, he has this, this great big house to play in, and Scott and I have become engaged, and so everything was great. And then COVID hit, and David, being immunocompromised, because he's had a kidney transplant, we tried everything we could to keep him safe from getting COVID. And unfortunately, he had to stay in the basement isolated. And unfortunately, it just didn't work. And he got COVID in February. And he was in the hospital for 5 months. And it killed the kidney. It's a miracle he's alive, but it killed his kidney. And he is now on permanent dialysis, and his health has completely plummeted. And we have found our situation has completely changed. And now we're caregivers to David pretty much full time. We have to take him to dialysis and I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional, but this work is very emotional to me. So it's just part of it. We have to take him to dialysis. We have to administer IVs to him every day of antibiotics. We feel like we're nurses. We're giving him IV antibiotics every day to keep him alive, because now it's affecting his heart. He has a heart infection. His health is basically just plummeted. So that's just the story of David and how we've kind of adopted him into our family, and really about the family that I've created here and that I'm in this house with during COVID. So this first picture, I started with a portrait I took of David. A couple of years ago, I did a series called I Offer This. You guys may have remembered it, but it was the saints that I did. There were portraits of celebrating historical female saints, like taking them out of the patriarchy and celebrating them. And I had set up the studio. I'm normally a portrait photographer, and I do photography because I love to connect with people, and that's just really what I love to do. So I had started I started from there, and I was doing a light test, and David was upstairs, and this is when he was healthy. And I was like, hey, will you sit for me and let me test my light. I had made this background. I had done it. I bought a big piece of canvas and painted it myself. And so anyway, he just sat for me, and I did a light test with him. And so that's what this picture was. It wasn't really, I'm so glad I took these pictures of him. It wasn't really for any purpose, except for I took a bunch. I ended up taking a bunch of him that day. So now that his health has deteriorated, he weighs about 100 pounds less than he does here. He's 6'5", and he just looks, you can tell he's not in the greatest of health, but this is the healthiest that he had ever been. He's only 61 years old. So this was when he was 59. But just his disease has just really aged his body. But this was back when he was healthy. And so the title of the piece is They Don't Love You Like I Love You. And I think I was just really angry at the time when I did this piece, because of he does have family, but they don't take care of him or help or do anything. And so it was just kind of a personal piece. And so I started by using it was an article I found about coronavirus and everything that we've been through. So you can kind of see the text in the background, but you can see the syringes that we use that we have to infuse him with an IV every day. And that's kind of what that started with in the background. And I built upon that and used his portrait. And then they also really, for me, they kind of also represent the vaccines and how that protects us, because for the longest time, he couldn't even get that. And we don't even know if that is protecting him, because he doesn't have an immune system. And so we're trying to protect him. And so that's what the piece is really about. It's just about I don't know, it's just, it's very personal. There's so much emotion in this piece for me. So that's really what the piece is about. And there's just a lot of layers in there. But like I said, I've never worked this way before. I've usually just done straight photography, and my work going towards more of an abstract direction has been, it's been great for me because it's been very freeing for me to just sit down at the computer and just to be able to create and work. And, I'm not having to work with a bunch of lighting equipment and things like that. So that's been great, because to be able to just make these pieces for this show, just strictly out of just getting my own emotions out about what we've been going through has been very therapeutic for me personally. But like I said, they almost just didn't happen. I didn't know if I could get it together. On top of all of this that we've been going through, David, my stepfather, who's like a father to me, is also now in full-time hospice, and I'm about to face losing him, and I've had to help my mom on top of taking care of David. So it's probably been the most stressful period of my life. So it's been really, really difficult for me to find time for myself to even create art, and to just to set aside some time for myself to do that. But I'm so glad that I did do this show, because I needed to do it. I needed to get all of this out. So now I'm going to move on to the next piece, which in the show, which is about my son, because really it's just been the three of us locked up in quarantine. My son is only 11, so he can't be vaccinated. And I feel like I'm trying to, on top of protecting David from the coronavirus, I've had to protect my son. And I also have to keep them separated, because Max has gone back to school, and he's exposed. We feel like he's very vulnerable, but we can't have him be around David, because he could easily bring it home again to David. So Max has become, I fear, I know, Rebecca, you mentioned this before, he's addicted to the screen. And it's heartbreaking, but yet it's the only way he has to play with his it's the only way he had to play with his friends during COVID. They literally get on there and they play games together, and it's a childhood that I do not understand, because I was outside playing. I was outside playing in a creek. I was outside building forts, playing in nature, and with my friends. And we live in the city. We don't really have a neighborhood where he can safely go outside and just run around and play. And he is on the screen playing. He's literally in virtual reality playing with his friends, and he's actually kind of a genius at it. I don't even understand how he creates games. He goes into these games, and he actually, like, he's asking me for a gaming computer, but he's like learning how to build his own games. So, a part of me just has to say, this is the future, which is so different from the childhood I had for him. But that's really kind of what this piece is about. And the title of this piece is A Hidden Factor of Great Importance. And really what that hidden factor is that I really, as a parent, there are so many things about Max that are like me, that are parts of me that are in Max that frustrate me. But also mirror back to myself, that in order to fully and completely love my child and to understand him, that I have to completely and fully love myself and love the things in him that I don't love about myself, that I see in him that really scare me or frustrate me. It's just being in this situation of COVID and how the world has changed so much. I try to recognize that every day. And I try to, understand him on a different level than I ever thought that I would have to try to figure out, because the world is so different than I would understand. I didn't understand what being a parent would be like and how difficult it would be. But I just think because of what we're going through today, it's just far beyond what I ever thought we would ever have to experience as parents. But I want to take you through the layers of this piece, because the last show I did, it was also, I had started moving into the abstract work, and I showed people the layers and how I worked. And I think people really liked that. So I know I might be going on too long, but if you guys want to see the layers of the piece, I kind of wanted to do that for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn them all off and then just go through them one by one, so you can kind of see how I worked. So I'm just going to kind of turn them on and off so you can kind of see them separately. I start in layers. Now, these are not the first layers that I started. I start from the portrait and playing with color. But for this, I thought some of the most interesting layers I did, this layer here, you can't see it because I turned the opacity down, but it is actually computer code that I put over him. And then I had found articles that about coronavirus and things like that, and that's in there. But I want to show you how I did it. I actually cut it out where it's actually just the, let me see if I can find it. Here we go. It's just the insides of the words. I took the words out and just used see, basically it's the opposite of the text. It's not it would be like the negative part of the text, so you can't really read it, but it's in there. So that's what's going on in this piece. And as you can see, it just kind of, as you add the layers back in, I'm missing something. Anyway, that's how it got to be, the final piece that it was. I think yeah, there we go. Something's missing. One of my layers is missing. That's why it doesn't look the same. Hold on. There we go. So that's the final piece. And I'll also show you, this is the portrait that I started with. And I did this series of Max. It was called Boy, and it was for the Connection show that Ty Smith curated a couple of years ago. And it had a panel, and they were all black and white squares of Max. And it was called Boy. And most of them were of him with his toys that were like weapons. And it was really, I was kind of doing a series about just childhood boys in the US. I mean, he had his Nerf guns and things like that, but I wasn't really trying to make a judgment about anything. I was just being more observant about it. And so this was one of the little squares that he did, and that's his little stuffed animal that he carries around, his red panda. And then how I used them in these is I used a high pass filter to make them more of the negative spaces in there. So that's how that one happened. And I have one more that I did. Of the last one is the in the river that created your mind, and it was for Scott. And this is not the final one, but this is almost there. Like I said, I could not save these the layers in these. The files were humongous, and it would it would be crashing right now if I showed you all of the files all of the layers of these files. If I had them all open at the same time, I couldn't do it. I would actually have to work in several layers and then save it and flatten it and then open it again. But then I would save that so I could go back and see the layers if I wanted to change something. But I had to keep saving it, flattening it, and then reopening it, because although I have a lot of RAM on my computer, the files were just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, the more layers. And stuff that I would add to them. But this one, I just wrote like my love letter to Scott that's in there, and then the colors, and it kind of ended up like this. And I took a very basic portrait of him on my iPhone. It was not special. I didn't light it because that really wasn't what it was about. So I'll show you that picture if I can find it. I mean, it was just like a simple picture of him on my cell phone, nothing special, but I just inverted it and did the same thing. So anyway, those are the pieces that I did. And like I said, there's just the backstory, I think, to me is what was the most important thing about them, and why I did each one of them, and how they ended up here. And just the process of me going into doing more abstract work from when I used to just do straight portraiture. And then also I always have worked in a lot of layers because I did photographic compositing, and I've always taken my work apart and put it back together. So I think it was kind of a natural progression for me to start moving that in that direction and working in more of an abstract manner, especially now that we've been so isolated and quarantined. It just, kind of happened that way, and me pulling out kind of old portraits and working with them in this way. So thank you. That's about all I have to say. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Does anybody have any questions?
I just want to say, Leah, that was just fantastic. And the whole backstory, you really have had an amazing year, and kudos to you for getting through and raising a child at the same time and being in quarantine. And I just love how personal these pieces are. They're just absolutely beautiful, really stunning. And Annie, your work always humbles me. It's just so incredible and so well thought out and poetic. And your work is absolutely beautiful as well. So I was honored to be in the show with both of y'all.
Feel the same way.
Thank you.
Leah, I love the way your work has responded to the limitations of COVID. It's like you've by inverting and taking the existing, what you have existing, and then creating these portraits, it's that flipping is really powerful. So in other words, like instead of using your technique that you've used in the past, where you bring people in to your space, so like the outside in, the fact that you're taking your inside work and kind of creating it and then bringing it outside is really pretty, I think, really kind of innovative and also powerful, considering you're infusing these portraits with the stories. So it's, and Rebecca had written about your work, where one thing I was thinking from the opening was how you use light in so many different ways, where it's like the physical nature of the paint in the opera creates light, and then how you are then capturing light on the water and painting it. So it's like, it's both a recording and then you're creating new water or a new shape that is both contained, but then also by applying the reflective surface, you're creating additional light. So it's really to me, really a powerful piece of kind of multiple layers of using light, both physically and then metaphorically. So I thought, I was really honored to be in the show with both of you. Leah, thank you for sharing your story.
And I just want to thank you guys too, especially because I didn't feel like I was very present with you guys as we developed the show together. And I just thank you for being understanding about that. And I just want you to know I'm so blown away by the process that you shared, and just the final pieces of your work. They're just stunning, and there's just I don't know, I just how you both have taken time and place and used the process to I was blown away by seeing the maps that you used, Annie, and the photos of the water, all of the stories. I'm blown away. So thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of the show with you guys too. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we'll wrap, unless anybody wants to jump in really quick with a question. Miriam's got one.
Sure, it's not really a question. The show is really a great show. The works look wonderful together. All three of your works in the space just really look great. I love hearing the background of not only the process, but I don't want to, not the word research, but the development of the ideas, the development of what is also in there besides the process for your pieces. And it's a really great show. And thank you for sharing everything with us.
Okay, thanks, guys. See you soon. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, y'all. Thank you, Jennifer, too, for
No problem.
all your
Thank you.
patience and support and understanding.
Okay.
You're awesome.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.